Let me tell you something about mothers-in-law. Some of them are lovely. Some of them bring you soup when you're sick. Some of them respect boundaries. And then there's Margaret, my mother-in-law, my husband's sweet, smiling, absolutely insane mother, the woman who believed that white sugar is poison, that red meat is murder, and that every single meal should be a shade of green that God never intended for human consumption. My name is Chloe. I'm 34. I love pizza, I love burgers, and I love my husband, Greg. In that order. Greg is a sweet, gentle man who unfortunately inherited his mother's weak stomach and his father's inability to say no to women. This is the story of how Margaret's healthy advice put Greg in the hospital, how I got my revenge, and why she now asks for written permission before stepping foot in my house. Chapter 1. The Kale Inquisition. It started innocently enough. When Greg and I got married, Margaret hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family, dear. I'm so glad Greg finally found someone who will take care of him." I didn't know then that take care of him meant feed him exactly what I tell you to feed him, or I will make your life a living hell. The first red flag came at our engagement dinner. I made lasagna, homemade, 3 cheeses, a secret sauce recipe from my Italian grandmother. It was glorious. Margaret took one bite, smiled her frozen smile, and said, "Oh dear, this is rich. Greg's stomach is very sensitive. You know he had colic as a baby." I laughed. "He's 32, Margaret. I think his stomach's are back to colic." She didn't laugh. She just pushed her plate away and spent the rest of the night whispering to Greg. I saw his face fall. I saw him nod. Later, Greg said to me, "Maybe we could try a little less cheese next time. Mom says dairy can cause inflammation." I should have run then. I should have grabbed my lasagna and sprinted for the hills. But I loved him, so I stayed, and I made less cheese. After we got married, Margaret started visiting every Sunday with Tupperware. Not normal Tupperware. Oh no, these were containers filled with things. Chia seed puddings, quinoa salads with no dressing, kale chips that tasted like crunchy sadness, a green smoothie that was so thick you could stand a spoon in it. "For Greg," she'd say, handing me the containers like she was delivering medicine to a dying man. "He needs his nutrients. You wouldn't believe how many men his age have heart problems because their wives don't feed them properly." I looked at Greg. Greg looked at his shoes. Greg always looked at his shoes when his mother spoke. "Margaret," I said, "Greg had a checkup last month. His doctor said he's perfectly healthy." "Doctors don't know everything," she sniffed. "Doctors are paid by Big Pharma. I've done my research." Her research. That was the scariest phrase in the English language. Margaret's research meant watching YouTube videos at 3 a.m. from women named Earth Mother 2020 who believe that vaccines cause magnetism and that you can cure cancer with celery juice. The weekly visits became daily texts. "Chloe, did Greg eat his Kale today?" "Chloe, white flour is a neurotoxin. I left almond flour in your mailbox." "Chloe, I saw you posted a picture of pancakes on Instagram. You know Greg can't have gluten. Are you trying to kill him?" I showed Greg the texts. He sighed. "She means well, honey. She just loves me." She accused me of attempted murder over pancakes. They were very fluffy pancakes. She's probably jealous. That was Greg. Sweet, avoiding conflict, completely incapable of telling his mother that her advice was actually just harassment. So I decided to handle it myself, politely, firmly, like an adult. I called Margaret. "Margaret, I love you, but I need you to stop sending me food instructions. Greg is a grown man. He can choose what he eats." There was a long pause. Then she said, in the sweetest voice imaginable, "Of course, dear. I understand completely. I'll back off." I was shocked, relieved. I thought I'd won. I was a fool. Chapter 2. The silent treatment, which wasn't silent at all. Margaret stopped texting me. Oh, but she didn't stop. She just changed tactics. She started texting Greg. Constantly. At work. At 2 a.m. while he was driving. "Gregory, did you know that red meat stays in your colon for 40 years? 40 years. Gregory, I read that sugar feeds cancer cells. Do you want cancer? Is that what you want? Gregory, your father's cousin's neighbor's brother died of a heart attack at 45. He ate bacon. One time. It's not worth the risk." Greg started coming home stressed. He'd look at the dinner I made, the perfectly normal dinner, and ask, Is there a lot of butter in this?" "It's a normal amount of butter, Greg. Mom says butter is the #1 cause of arterial plaque. Mom also thinks the moon landing was filmed in a basement. Eat your chicken." But the damage was done. Margaret had planted a seed, a paranoid, anxious, kale-flavored seed, and Greg, sweet, gullible Greg, started watering it. He began researching clean eating. He joined Facebook groups with names like Alkaline Warriors and the Liver Clush Collective. He bought a juicer. He bought 3 juicers. He bought a dehydrator to make his own kale chips because store-bought kale chips have preservatives. I watched my husband transform from a man who enjoyed a good burger to a man who weighed his flaxseed on a digital scale. "Greg, you're losing weight." "That's good, right? Mom says belly fat is inflammation." "You weigh 140 pounds. You're 6 feet tall. You look like a praying mantis." He didn't listen. He was on a mission to be the healthiest corpse in the cemetery. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Greg came home from work early. He was pale, sweating, holding his stomach. Chloe, I don't feel good. I put my hand on his forehead. He was burning up. How long have you felt like this? A few days. I thought it's just a detox. Detox from what? Mom said when you start eating clean, your body releases toxins. You get flu-like symptoms. It's called a healing crisis. I stared at him. A healing crisis. You think this is a healing crisis? He nodded weakly. Then he threw up on the rug. Then he threw up again. And then he collapsed. I called an ambulance. Greg was unconscious by the time they arrived. His blood pressure was 80/40. No, he's been eating kale and quinoa and drinking green sledge. The doctor blinked. For how long? For 6 months. And before that, normal food. Burgers, pizza, occasional and vegetable. The doctor wrote something on his chart. I saw him write the word malnutrition and then under it, suspected orthorexia nervosa. Orthorexia, an obsession with healthy eating that becomes unhealthy. I'd heard of it. I just never thought my sweet, gentle husband would become a poster child for it. Greg needed surgery, not because of the malnutrition directly, but because his body had become so weak that a routine gallbladder issue, one that could have been managed with diet, turned into a full-blown emergency. The surgeon said, his gallbladder's inflamed, we need to remove it. Normally we'd try to calm the inflammation first, but his body doesn't have the reserves to wait. I signed the consent forms. I held Greg's hand as they wheeled him into the operating room. He looked tiny under the sheets. His cheekbones were sharp. His eyes were hollow. I'm sorry, he whispered. I was just trying to be healthy. I know, baby, I know. And then the doors closed. Chapter 3, The Waiting Room of Hell. Margaret arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after I called her. She burst through the waiting room doors like a hurricane in Birkenstocks. What happened? What did you feed him? I told you he couldn't handle it. I stood up. I'm not tall, but I stood up very slowly, and I looked her directly in the eyes. Margaret, sit down. She sat. Even she could tell that this was not the time for her usual nonsense. Greg is in surgery, I said. His gallbladder was inflamed. The surgeon says it's been building for months, possibly years, but the final trigger was severe electrolyte imbalance caused by extreme dietary restriction. I let that sink in. Dietary restriction? Margaret's voice went high. But I only told him to eat healthy, clean, natural. You can't blame Margaret. He was eating your diet, the one you texted him about at 2 a.m., the one you sent me tupperware for, the one you said would prevent heart disease and cancer, and whatever else you read on goop.com. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was just trying to help. You almost killed your son. The words hung in the anti-guillotine blade. Margaret's face crumpled. For the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. No recipe, no research, no snide comment about her cooking. She just sat there crying silently while I stared at the OR doors and waited for news about my husband.